This title is very interesting. Balkans, Ukraine, Mid East, what they share, what they have in common, why together?
Well, the first thing to understand is that they're actually quite close to each other. They're neighbors. Middle East is a neighbor of the Balkans, and Ukraine is a neighbor of both Balkans and Middle East. And they share some history in the Ottoman Empire, and Ukraine, of course, has a long history in the Russian Empire. So that's in empires, governments tried to rule not so directly, but leaving some local structures in place. They didn't homogenize their populations the way Western European states tried to do. And that's at the root of many of the issues in the Balkans, Ukraine, and Middle East, because people did not all become Muslim, they didn't all become Russian speakers, they didn't all become one ethnicity in the Balkans.
Yeah. You're talking about national groups during the Ottoman Empire, and how you connect that with today's situation in Balkans?
Well, it's directly connected because the populations weren't homogenized. You still have in the Balkans Catholics, Orthodox, Muslims, Vlachs, Albanians. You still have the groups that were present in the Ottoman Empire, but that idea that not only individuals have rights, but that groups have rights is in many respects at the core of today's issues. And when you attach the idea of group rights to specific territory, it leads to war.
Mm-hmm. Then we have, after that, Austro-Hungarian Empire, who did directly opposite thing, tried to do opposite.
Tried and failed. I mean,
and failed, I agree.
Tried and failed. So what you've got in the Balkans, in my way of thinking in the 90s, three factors that lead to war. One is the breakup of former Yugoslavia. A second is the political ambitions and military capability of Slobodan Milosevic. And third is the ethnic nationalist movements, which in former Yugoslavia were the main form of opposition to communism. That wasn't true every place. Some other places, liberal Democrats were the opposition to communism. But in the former Yugoslavia, the main opposition to the communist regime was ethnic nationalist. And we see that very clearly in a number of different countries in the Balkans.
Now, today, 2019, Balkans is still a troublemaker, territory of Europe. How do you see today's situation?
Well, I see it rather more optimistically than some people do. Not because I'm an optimist, but because I think real progress has been made. People criticize what's gone on in the Balkans, usually from the perspective of, this isn't liberal democracy, this isn't what we wanted for the Balkans, and I agree, it's not what I wanted for the Balkans, and there are some very real problems. But let's face it, having problems with corruption and state capture is better than having problems with mass murder and genocide. And, we've come a long way from mass murder and genocide. We haven't come as far as I would like because there hasn't been the kind of acknowledgement of what was done, especially in Bosnia, but also in Kosovo, that I would like to see. But we've come a long way from that, and today, people can circulate freely throughout the Balkans. If you're going to have a European future, you have to be capable of treating all your citizens correctly and equally. That's something that I think you have to recognize. You described the Balkans as part of Europe. That wasn't the way people described the Balkans in the 1990s. That's a big change. It started with the summit in Sarajevo, I think in 2000, and it has grown since then, this expectation that the future of the Balkans is all in Europe. Now, admittedly, Europe isn't what it was. It's going to be hard to get into Europe. It gets harder and harder with every new accession, as a matter of fact. But you get the benefits of being in Europe by trying, not only by getting in. It's the reforms that bring you the benefits. And I think that's very important, and it's the right course for the Balkans.
You mentioned practically populism in globally thinking, and we have President Trump here who is populist, and globalism is withdrawing a little bit, especially in Europe now. And what kind of impact we can expect in Balkans because of the populist movement?
You know, the results for the Balkans, I think, first of all, it's led to some revival of ethnic nationalist sentiment in the Balkans. And you see it in Croatia and Croatia's relationship with the Bosnian Croats. You see it in Bakir Izetbegovic and his relationship to President Erdogan. You see it in Serbia with the relationship of Vučić to Russia. It's pretty clear, but it's also present, for example, in the Albanian areas of Macedonia, Kosovo, and Albania, where, you know, ethnic nationalism has gained some strength, I would say. So you face that, and it's okay with me. You know, people are entitled to be ethnic nationalists if they want to be. They're not entitled to kill other people because of it, or, in my view, I would not like to see them ruining the Balkans' chance to get into Europe with this ethnic nationalism stuff. And I think it could ruin their chances.
Do you think that Dayton Peace Agreement is some kind of victory for Slobodan Milosevic?
I do think that Milosevic came to Dayton suing for peace, and that he got a deal in Dayton that suited his main interests. Let me explain. Why did he come suing for peace? Well, the Croatian Serbs had just walked out of Croatia a few months before, and they were screaming for his head because he had done nothing to protect them. He feared that the Bosnian Serbs, whom he said were 600,000, probably less than that at the time, 400,000 or 500,000, he was afraid they were going to walk out of Bosnia and Herzegovina if the Bosnian army and the HVO continued to be successful. I have no reason to believe they wouldn't have been successful, at least to Brčko. They would have taken Banja Luka within days, and they would have marched to Brčko quite easily. The Serbs weren't actually fighting at that point. They were retreating. You know, I think Milosevic realized that if he lost this war with a big outflux of Serbs into Serbia, his hold on power in Serbia would have been in danger. So what did he get? He got the contact group arrangement, 5149, which had been decided under completely different circumstances several years later and no longer had any real validity. The Federation had taken something like 67% of the territory at the time of Dayton and had to be rolled back from that. So yes, he also got something very clever, which he had a problem in Belgrade politically because Radovan Karadzic was regarded as a rival to him in Belgrade, not just a leader of the Bosnian Serbs. And so what he did was he gave the heart of Radovan Karadzic's support was in part in Sarajevo. And by agreeing to turn over basically all of Sarajevo, metropolitan Sarajevo, to the Federation, he really hurt Radovan Karadzic's constituency. So he got a pretty good deal at Dayton. There's no question about that. And many of the problems we face today are unquestionably rooted in the negotiation and the arrangements in the Dayton Constitution. There's no question in my mind about that. That doesn't make me regret Dayton. It makes me criticize Dayton, but it doesn't make me regret it because it did end the war, and that was important at the time.
Absolutely. But historically speaking, was it a mistake to stop that HVO and the Bosnian army, and also Croatian army, that offensive? Was that mistake from United States and European allies to stop that offensive?
This is a very difficult question.
It is.
And I will tell you my view. I was working on support for the Federation at the time, and when we were ordered to stop our trips into Bosnia, we were traveling with the HVO and the Bosnian army. We weren't giving them military advice, but we were helping them with civilian issues, displaced people and things of that sort. And we were ordered to stop. And my colleague and I protested up to the level of an undersecretary in the State Department, saying, why do you want to stop? Our friends are winning. Let's let them go at least to Brčko. And beyond Brčko, I had my doubts that they would go because the HVO had made it clear that there were no Croats in Eastern Bosnia. They weren't going there. Eastern Bosnia is also very difficult terrain, so that to fight the war in Eastern Bosnia would have been very difficult. So I've asked myself 1,000 times since Dayton, okay, you protested, you were overruled. Why didn't you protest more loudly? Why didn't you send a dissent message? The State Department has a system. I could have sent a message dissenting from my instructions. And the answer is that we thought what Dick Holbrooke was trying to do, what eventually became the Dayton Agreement, we knew the general outlines of that, what he was trying to do. And we thought it was a house of cards that would collapse. We didn't think it would succeed. So I'm going to risk my career to protest something that I don't think is going to succeed? Look, we're human beings. In retrospect, should I have protested more loudly? Probably so. I protested, though, and I can assure you Dick Holbrooke didn't appreciate it. I would add this. Had the Federation forces taken, let's assume they take Brčko. So the Serb forces would have, Brčko is the linchpin of Republika Srpska. So,
because of the corridor.
And during the war, I mean, the Bosniaks tried many times to take Brčko, and they failed. But let's assume they take Brčko, but the HVO says you're on your own in Eastern Bosnia. Well, Eastern Bosnia, most of the principal municipalities were in fact majority Muslim before the war. But taking Eastern Bosnia would have been very difficult because of the terrain and the lack of supplies to the Bosnian army. And frankly, the international community would probably have intervened at that point and said, no, you got to stop here. Mm-hmm. What would that have led to? Probably an ethnic partition of Bosnia, with Eastern Bosnia going to Serbia. Would that have been a good solution? I don't think so. Now, that's all speculative, I admit. But I think if you think through the consequences of allowing the war to continue up to Brčko, the consequences aren't beautiful.
And also, I know in that time I was talking with some American diplomats in the United Nations. And Albright was there, if you remember, in 1995. And I just came to the United States, and I was told that Americans were afraid of a big number of refugees. Serbian refugees, Bosnian Serbs.
Yes, this was what Milosevic pushed. That it's a humanitarian concern. Too many refugees. And there was, I mean, it had happened in Croatia already. 200,000 people in a matter of a few days had left. But you and I both know Slobodan Milosevic. His concern wasn't the refugees and the humanitarian crisis. His concern was the political threat that those refugees would have posed inside Serbia. That's why he came to Dayton, suing for peace.
We're talking now about Bosnia, then Serbia. Serbia and Kosovo, 2019. Tough political fight.
It's a tough political fight. I think a lot of progress has been made there, too. Well, right now, you know, people are being enticed by this proposition of land and people swaps.
That is, I mean, main question now.
Yeah, big question now. Let me address that. I don't doubt the legal authority of a sovereign state to cede part of its population and territory to another state. I mean, there's no legal issue. If you're sovereign, you can do that. First thing that has to be understood is that only after recognition can that be done. Only after recognition, exchange of diplomatic representatives at the ambassador
Only
level.
after Serbia recognized Kosovo.
Only after Serbia recognizes Kosovo and Kosovo recognizes Serbia. That has to be clear. So, yes, it's possible to do it legally, but only if you do it right, and that's after recognition. The bigger question is it smart? Well, I think it's very dumb. I see the maps. I don't know where they come from. I know they can't pass in the parliaments, and they can't pass in a referendum in Kosovo. But that's, you know, those are not the only problems. There are problems in the region because this would precipitate instability, first and foremost in Kosovo, because the Serbs south of the Ibar would clearly be at an enormous disadvantage if this happens. And on that subject, I cede my right to talk to Father Sava, who's been very clear about this, absolutely opposed to partition of Kosovo because of the danger it poses to Serbian people and monuments south of the Ibar. But it also poses a problem for Bosnia and Herzegovina, and Milorad Dodik has made that absolutely clear what the problem is for Bosnia and Herzegovina. He intends to follow in the same path if there's partition of Kosovo. And worse than that, even from the American point of view, is that it would strengthen Putin's hand in South Ossetia, Abkhazia, which are secessionist parts of Georgia, in Transnistria, secessionist part of Moldova, and then in Ukraine. And Ukraine, in particular for the Americans, is a red line that can't be crossed. And you need the Russians to allow Kosovo into the UN. And can you imagine the Russians allowing that to happen without asking for something? Now, it's true that Putin met with Hashim Thaci, and it's a good thing. It's a good thing. But you can't imagine that Putin's going to give away Kosovo without concessions on Crimea, for example. And the Americans have made it very clear, no concession on Crimea, on the annexation of Crimea. So, I mean, we all live, you may not love globalization, but we all live in a global world where there are consequences. And the consequences of this maneuver between, I admit, to two nationalist presidents of Kosovo and Serbia may make infinite good sense, some kind of exchange of territories. But look at the consequences more globally. They're devastating.
The United States actually has changed position about Kosovo, probably mostly thanks to Mr. John Bolton, security advisor for President Trump. Do you share that opinion?
I don't think there's any doubt that John Bolton, who opposed Kosovo's independence, who despises Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton, would love to ruin one of their big achievements. There's no doubt about that in my mind. But I also think it's a mistake to overinterpret what the Americans have done. What the Americans have done is say, you know, if you come to us with a proposition that you can both agree to, we're going to have a serious look at it. And what's more, we'll give you a ceremony in the Rose Garden if we can all come to an agreement. I think this ceremony in the Rose Garden has become a major objective for Mr. Vucic and Mr. Thaci.
After Russia practically lost Macedonia and Montenegro in tough fight with the United States.
That's
Europe.
exactly right. I think that's exactly the way to think about it. The Russians tried to kill Djukanovic, and they tried to prevent Montenegrin membership in NATO. They failed. They tried to ruin the name agreement between Greece and Macedonia, and they failed. They're now going to fail to prevent Macedonian entry into NATO, and Macedonia is going to move very, very quickly now on EU membership.
But speaking of Russia, after Macedonia and Montenegro, do you think maybe the Russians will now put their focus on Bosnia and Herzegovina, especially Serbia, but that part of Bosnia and Herzegovina under, I would say, Dodik control right now? Is that we have over there some positive energy from Macedonia and Montenegro, but can be that reverse in some negativities? Are we talking about
Yes.
Russia and Bosnia?
Yes.
In
The answer is yes. They will refocus and redouble their efforts in Serbia and in Republika Srpska. They didn't like to lose in Montenegro and Macedonia. They know they have no chance in Kosovo whatsoever. Albania, they have no chance. But they will redouble their efforts in Belgrade and in Banja Luka. And Milorad Dodik welcomes that with open arms. I think the fact of the matter is that Bosnia and Herzegovina is in real trouble. But there's no way the international community can really focus on that real trouble until it normalizes relations between Belgrade and Pristina. We have trouble doing two things at once. That's the truth of the matter.
And in the end, Trump administration in Balkans, anything new? Could we see anything new? Maybe stronger presence over there?
But I don't see it. I just don't see it, because American preoccupations lie much further east, and even further east we're withdrawing. So what I think we need more than anything else is more clarity about American diplomacy and less reliance on the military instrument. There is a potential military problem in Bosnia and Herzegovina that arises right now from this excessive armament being shipped to the Republika Srpska special forces. This is a disreputable thing that the Russians are doing. It has real risks attached to it. I don't think anybody can conduct a long war in Bosnia and Herzegovina any longer, because they have neither the political will nor the equipment to do that. But you could have a short war, and you could have serious instability. And if Dodik is thinking about secession, I can introduce him to a few Muslims and even Croats who might be thinking about seizing Brčko and ending the existence of Republika Srpska. So there is a risk of war in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and I do think we have to recognize that and do what we can to prevent it from happening. But solving the bigger problem of Bosnia and Herzegovina's dysfunctional governance structure has to wait, I think, for future generation of diplomats, but not too long, I would imagine, maybe 5 years from now.
Daniel Serwer, Thank you so much. It was
My
a big
pleasure.
pleasure to talk with you. Thank you, sir.
I just told you there for a couple of minutes. Professor, could I get you to pick up your book again for me, please?
This is a magnificent example of globalization.
Yeah.
American author, German-owned publisher. This is a magnificent example of globalization.
Yeah.
American author, German-owned publisher, but British author. Completely produced in India.
Oh my God. It is globalization.
This is
Yeah.
globalization.
But I really hope that you resign one book for me. You know, that
I'll be happy to. You didn't bring one, did you?
I didn't bring, but I bring later one book. You have to sign for me, please.
Sure.
That's issue. You
Sure.
have to.
I,
You
I
have to
don't
please.
offer people books because they cost me a lot of money to make.
No. I'm not talking now.
They don't
But
sell.
later, I would like to have that
They're not kind
as
to
my
authors.
memorabilia.
I got 6 feet.
What?
6 feet. The rest I have to pay. I get a discount, but the rest I have to pay. That's what publishing is
Oh, my
these days. You know, you think your business